Hello and welcome to Old and New Turkey, our series with Ahval, joined by Gökhan Bacık, as usual, as regular guests. Gökhan, hello.
Hello, Yavuz.
Good to have you here. Gökhan Bacık is a lecturer with Palacký University in the Czech Republic, and Old and New Turkey is the title of our series where we try to at least attempt to analyze the puzzling picture of Turkey, ever so puzzling, of course, and there are lots of changes taking place there, many of them very radical changes with an unknown future. So let's begin, Gökhan, with the latest developments. Adding to the agenda, of course, the series of barrage of videos unleashed by the mobster, Sedat Peker, in a location in the Middle East, in Gulf, and this has been now about a month, and he released this morning, as of May 30, Sunday, his 8th video, and each and every video, of course, has shaken and stirred Turkey, the Turkish establishment, especially the power structure of Erdogan, President Erdogan and his partner, Devlet Bahçeli, the leader of the ultranationalist MHP party. And these allegations are if true, very, very serious. Some of them are not new. Some of them point always out to Turkey's unresolved dark past in the past decades, involving dirty warriors, summary executions, extrajudicial killings and disappearances and torture against the opponents, involving crime rings, but also subversive elements, so-called deep state or shadow state figures in cooperation with the regular state. But these relations are, of course, pointing out to informal relations. Many of the assassinations and killings that Sedat Peker again brings to the fore are unresolved assassinations. For example, the one against Uğur Mumcu, the famous journalist on the secular daily Cumhuriyet, and on North Cyprus, Kutlu Adalı, a journalist and columnist with social democrat inclinations, murdered also in the mid-1990s. I'm giving this background so that our viewers can clearly understand what we are going to talk about, but also there are new allegations about narco-trafficking, between Venezuela and Colombia, as Sedat Peker, the mobster, alleges, and also involving the crime ring mob involvement in taking over some ports and marinas, and old figures like Mehmet Ağar, a former Minister of Interior, and also current Minister of Interior, Süleyman Soylu. But of course, this is a political case, and this hits the government. So how do we make the latest, of course, video? I should also add that it's bringing to the fore this time directly putting the spotlight on Erdogan, as opposed to the ones before, and again, sheds light on the allegations that the arms trade or logistics support, rather, to jihadists, Al-Nusra, which is declared as a terrorist organization by the United States in late 2012. And Peker says that this was an ongoing operation. Lots of arms and ammunition was transported with his help, with his involvement. So we have a very clear case of what we call maybe mobster gate in Turkish politics right now. So what is your take on this?
Well, yeah, I agree to a large extent. This is a quite important case, even in Turkish standards. But my first point is that I'm not sure if this is because of a personal fight, because probably you also remember this is not the first time we witness the mafia aspect of Turkish statehood. If I'm not wrong, there was the case with Hezbollah, Turkish Hezbollah, the assassination of the Turkish Hezbollah leader Hüseyin Velidedoğlu, and also the famous or infamous Susurluk case. And probably this is the third time we witness that there is a mafia aspect of Turkish state. But in each case, we are not sure if it is because of a personal fight between, or among the guys, mobsters and the state elites. In other words, because Sedat Peker is not happy about something about the Berat Albayrak or Soylu or Erdogan, or if this is a reflection of a
aspect of a power game, of course.
Or if this is a reflection of a more complicated and complex power struggle among different blocs.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is more important to understand or to speculate on its potential impact on Turkish politics, because listening Peker, sometimes I get the second impression. For example, while he was talking about this arms transfer to Syria, he's giving it in a narrative through an informal structure rather than Turkish intelligence or Turkish army. So he's trying to make a classification of Turkish state and some people within Turkish, let's say, government, mainly around Erdogan. So I think we should wait first to understand if the mobster case, Sedat Peker case, is because of a personal, let's say, power struggle, or it is more than that. On the other hand, in a historical perspective, Yavuz, there are because of some reasons, informalism, because this is even about mafia, but this is one, let's say, version of informalism, is always part of Turkish state structure. So even Turkish state is organized on paper as a modern state, it's always some of formal and informal elements. So there is nothing new about that.
Because, as you say, it is part of the administration culture.
That's right. Even I could say that to some extent, traditionally, Home Affairs Minister in Turkey is the guy who orchestrates that complicated relationship between formal and informal. That's why whenever we talk about mafia in Turkey, Çatlı, we always talk about Minister of Domestic Affairs, because that tradition requires Turkish state to orchestrate its relations with that informal aspect. So here's the question: why we have this informal aspect? The first reason is this is Turkish state tradition. Because Turkish elites believe that a normal state organized as modern state is not enough to survive. So they always need this informalism. The second is foreign policy. Cyprus, we all know that to a large extent, Turkish foreign policy in northern Cyprus has been conducted by these informal actors. And also talk about Libya today or Syria today. I mean, if you are involved in such affairs, you need some kind of actors in that way. But also there are sociological reasons to explain informalism. One is religious groups. They also distort modern state. And also corruption. If you have a lot of corruption where the leading state elites are involved, then you should expand state in the informal way, just like oligarchs in Turkey, very much like Putin's Russia. Mm-hmm. And maybe a final reason why we have such a very strong informal impact on Turkish state is because of West, because the mainly US and European Union are reluctant in foreign policy because they are reluctant powers in global, particularly Middle East. So it gives a lot of space to countries like Iran, Qatar, and Russia, and they create large areas of informal politics. For example, to a large extent, Turkish-Qatar relations today, Turkish-Iranian relations. Even in some regards, Turkish-Russian relations have a lot of space which is handled through informal mechanisms. And this is mainly because they feel themselves better to go on through this track. So there are several reasons.
More convenient, more unhindered,
right.
more unhindered, perhaps, as you said.
That's right. That's what mainly Russia. I mean, because of course the West is not completely passive. There are some sanctions, but they are not enough. I mean, so countries like Iran, Russia, Qatar, and sometimes Turkey prefer to proceed through informal networks because they are not challenged here. I mean, comparatively speaking, and they are not punished because of that. International system, because the West is somehow paralyzed, is more tolerant to informal mechanisms and procedures. And by the way, when we talk about informalism, it's not about Turkey. If you imagine global map, there's a huge area which starts from Pakistan, ends up in Libya, where borders are eroded, states collapse, Libya, Syria. So there are a lot of opportunity for states, and they are using
non-state actors operational.
That's the way. So Turkey is, I think, I mean, Turkey, which is itself famous for its informal mechanism within formal state, but also now enjoying that, you know, opportunity zone in Syria, in Libya, in Caucasia, in other areas. But in this case, this is mafia mainly because of a mobster leader. It's mainly because of, it looks like to me, because of corruption and the way how authoritarianism is organized in Turkey, especially in the 5 years. But as I said in the beginning, we should first wait to understand why this fight is taking place. Because if you remember the Turkish Hezbollah case, it was clear that Turkish state used Turkish Hezbollah and decided to purge it. So it was because of that state intention we were informed the grave houses. You remember many people buried under houses. But comparatively speaking, for example, the Susurluk incident was much more like a kind of fight within informal actors around the state. So
Susurluk incident meaning, just inside brackets, 1996 November event where strange constellation of people in a Mercedes-Benz crashed into a large truck in Susurluk town or near, and in that there was a high-level police chief, and very clear, feared sort of, you know, subversive, dirty, deep state actor Abdullah Çatlı, and also sort of, you know, village guard, tribe leader from Urfa, Siverek, and this was a very clear picture of how entangled the sort of organized crime, deep state, mafia, and also the state bureaucracy, because this brought to the fore lots of allegations and suspicions, and so also the state report, sort of a so-called independent report.
There are 2 points about. The first is we never know how. I mean, why the public was informed about the details. I mean, nobody. Of course, there were some experts who know about Çatlı, Bucak, you know, the tribes. For example, there are even some scholarly articles which talk about Çatlı's role against PKK, you know, part of Turkish intelligence. But we don't know why it became immediately such a public event. Okay, so the question is, it could be because of a state decision or because of a power struggle. The second is, very much like Çatlı, listening to Sedat Peker, we learned that this, I mean, these guys act almost like a state agent. They have offices close to top officials. They are acting in very intricate international events, such as bringing weapons to Albania, part of the war, for example. And you can't imagine those people are able to execute such decisions without some kind of formal support. So that again illustrates that the Turkish state is somewhat formal and informal, and just like we have bureaucracy in the formal realm, we have some kind of people who act as the so-called bureaucrats of informalism. It shouldn't be necessarily as mafia or mobster. And more interestingly, in the case of Sedat Peker, he was also employed by the state in domestic politics after 15 July failed coup. He was, he acted for a while as a kind of domestic political leader, you know, some kind of declarations by, and I remember he even organized a public rally in Rize, in northern province, when Mr. Davutoğlu was prime minister, and the government, I think, as far as I know, the first time in Turkish modern history, the government tolerated a mobster, a mafia leader, organizing a political rally in the middle of a Turkish province, Rize, which is known for its support for Erdogan. So the key question here is, I think, this is of course a mobster gate, but the question is the characteristic of it. Is it because of a personal struggle, or is it because of a more complicated tension within state mechanism?
A strong sign of this, it is very, very unprecedented, is that in the appearance of television, of Minister of Interior Süleyman Soylu, there was talk about the role, let's not go into the details, but role of the police chief of Istanbul. And this police chief, day or two after appeared, came out very strongly challenging the Minister of Interior, whom he's supposed to report, said, okay, sack me if you can, if you dare, sack me if you dare. And this remained unanswered, unresponded by the Minister of Interior. I think in sort of underlining what you just said about how complicated things are, this statement or this stand by a high-level security officer, overlooking a large city, is quite telling, actually.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, which I agree, which shows that this fight is also linked to those divisions within state, but also there's another dimension, which is about the former Minister of Treasury, Berat Albayrak, because many people underestimate his ongoing impact on Turkish state mechanism. There are many acting ministers, many acting deputies in the parliament who are reporting to Berat. I think Berat Albayrak's problem is he lost the public support because of his poor, performance as a minister in economy. Otherwise, he's still very organized and strong. And there is no doubt that Albayrak is trying to use within party reaction towards Soylu to use this wave in favor of itself, because there's a apparent feud between Soylu and Albayrak as well.
I see. So there's very little doubt that the ground on which the ruling AKP was standing as AKP, this ground is crackling quite strongly or loudly now. We will see what happens. But at the same time, as challenged as he is by these allegations and pressures from whatever public discourse there is left in Turkey, still something, Erdogan is decided and determined to go his own way. And he continues, and especially the dates, May 28, May 29, were very important for him and whatever he represents, the Turkish type of Ikhwanism, national view, and the tradition that he basically is a carrier of, taking over from his sort of, mentor, Necmettin Erbakan, and a huge mosque, big enough, more than big enough for Taksim Square, which was the epicenter of the Gezi protests, was opened, was under pomp and circumstance on a Friday with the Friday prayer, and applauded by the sort of political Islam segments in Turkey, supporters of Erdogan, as a historic step, because mainly Taksim, the district, is known as, during the Ottoman times, as the center of non-Muslim sort of subjects of the Ottoman Empire, and traditionally a very strong, very lively district. And this was the dream of the Turkish Islamists, to erect a mosque there. And also another symbolism is, of course, the day after is May 29, the anniversary of the conquest of Istanbul. Again, in that context, this mosque was mentioned a lot, as if this ceremony was not enough, and to be limited in the Taksim Mosque, the ceremony is sort of spilled over to Hagia Sophia, which is now a mosque. And there was some very remarkable statements made there, some rituals that sort of irked the secular segments again, and international observers also. What does these two very clear, these incidents, these events, in terms of Erdogan facing the challenges and going his own way, in general mean? How should we read into this?
Well, I think there are a number of facts. The first is Erdogan is Islamist. So no matter what the political context is, he's trying to Islamize Turkey. So this should be seen part of that. The second is political context, which is culture politics. Erdogan is well aware of the, problems in economy, in foreign policy. So he wants to keep his constituency united behind him. And in regard to that constituency, in this setting, Erdogan is acting not as a president, but as the leader of Turkish Islamist movement. So he's trying to keep them united. I think he knows that such cultural politics is no longer helpful in terms of persuading large groups of people, because in the Turkish case, we shouldn't forget that economy is the main window. So people are interested in other issues, economy, culture, religion, first through economy. So if economy is bad, people are not caring about such cultural stuff. So, Taksim Mosque is, of course, important for religious groups, but for the larger masses, for people, is not. So Erdogan's intention is to pay enormous attention to such cultural issues, Ayasofya or Taksim, is part of his mission as the leader of Turkish Islamic movement. He wants those people staying behind him because he has some fears about economy. Mm-hmm. I think to some extent he's correct. He's consistent, because if you look at the Turkish, let's say, sociological structure, the urban areas, the western part of Turkey, are much sensitive to economic deterioration. But when it comes to eastern part of Turkey, central Anatolia, some provinces like Rize and Erzurum, no matter how economy is bad, cultural politics may help Erdogan. So this should be seen as a kind of spatial dialogue between Erdogan and the larger groups of people who are sensitive to Islamic issues. But I should again say, unlike 5 years ago, 10 years ago, cultural politics is not very influential across the country. Given the economic crisis, given deterioration in tourism in cities like Antalya, in Izmir, in western urban areas, I don't think that religious narrative is going to help Erdogan. But aware of that, he still wants to keep that constituency united, because it helps him at least to keep a large group of people, maybe 20% plus 25%, because we should also appreciate Erdogan. For the first time in Turkish history, he is the leader who somewhat transformed a serious group of people into an Islamist form. So we have an Islamist constituency in Turkey, like Egypt, just like the basis of Ikhwan in Egypt, or in Jordan, even in Palestine, for example. So before Erdogan, there were some people center-right who are sensitive to Islam, so on and so forth. But with Erdogan, now we have a truly Islamist constituency for which economic issues are critical, but it doesn't change their perspective on major issues, including economy. So this is, I think, a very strong signal that Erdogan wants to keep that dynamic working in favor of himself, even if it is with a limited group of people.
Mm-hmm. But briefly, if you can, what about the other side of the camp, other camp, the secular segments, secular urban segments? Erdogan lost, as we know, remember the elections in Istanbul. Can it also be a kind of an act of sort of revenge, but beyond that, even to drive a further wedge between the secular segments and the segment that you mentioned before, in order to prepare the ground for an election as he wants, as he designs, based on polarization again.
That's true.
And also the statement that he delivered in Taksim in the launch, he was attacking Gezi protests, the Gezi phenomenon, very clearly, in a very, very hostile language.
Well, I think an idealistic scenario for Erdogan is the electoral process where we discuss a lot of stuff about Kemalism, religion, Ayasofya West. Probably Erdogan is trying to provoke seculars. So the main reason is the opposition, mainly Kemalist party, is somewhat, is not very much involved in such cultural politics. So they are silent. Silence is not helping Erdogan. So Erdogan...
They are not silent, but they are timid.
Yeah, timid, that's right. Because here's the point. I mean, I am also sometimes critical of Kemalist Party, but we should realize a simple fact. It is very difficult to defeat Erdogan in a cultural fight, in a cultural way. Because Turkey is very religious. Turkey is very nationalist. I mean, we discussed it before. All parties in Turkey are nationalist, including Good Party, Kemalist Party. So the idea, I mean, for Erdogan, an idealistic scenario is an electoral process where economy has a little role, but a lot of discussions about religion, Hagia Sophia, maybe Taksim Mosque or headscarf, who knows, some cultural issues vis-a-vis US, European Union, identity, Kurdish issue. So I think he's trying to bring opposition back onto that, let's say, culture track. That's why he's, if I may use this term, trying to provoke opposition, the Kemalist Party. And he knows let's say, the spots he should target. One is Atatürk, his personality. That's why Atatürk is oft, attacked by Islamists. Another is, for example, woman body is very critical. Sexuality, in other words, for example, some gender relations. Family is another issue, for instance. And the Kurdish issue is also very much symbolic, particularly to weaken the coalition between Good Party, Nationalist Party, and the Kemalist Party. So I'm expecting more from Erdogan. And to be honest, I see Erdogan is underperforming on these issues. Normally he used to be. And the reason why he is not performing is Turkish society is very much, let's say, fed up with those. And the main reason why culture politics is no longer such serious or influential in Turkey is economy. Because Turkish people are very pragmatic, just like many, across the globe. So they are looking secondary issues such as religion through the lens of economy, particularly the urban areas. So I don't think if economy goes in this negative direction, that religious or symbolic narrative is not going to help Erdogan a lot in the western part of Turkey. But I'm not sure when it comes to eastern part, provinces like Erzurum.
We talked long time, but final question. Erdogan underperforming, and that kind of surprised you said. Given all these elements that we spoke about, also we know that the draft constitution is an issue that he's very keen on. You may say perhaps it's part of the election strategy based on polarization again, to use it as a tool or leverage to polarize the society and make a choice between what he wants and not. But underperforming, do you think his chances to politically survive are lower now?
Yes, that's why Erdogan is trying to, let's say, figure out a proper time for elections, probably a post-corona period, and Erdogan and his team expecting a kind of economic recovery in a post-corona, which many people, not only in Turkey, because many people, economists, experts tell us that in a post-corona period, there will be a lot of, let's say, people rushing into the markets, tourism revival, so on and so forth. So, yeah, that's right. So Erdogan expects that post-corona, a post-corona recovery also will help him a lot. So he's trying to figure out a proper time where his political, let's say, orientation, Islamism, will perfectly match with a kind of post-corona, let's say, economic recovery. So for the time being, I don't think Erdogan will accept any kind of election. Probably his chance is very low right now. And the political conditions, economic conditions remind the local elections. Erdogan is very weak in economy, and he lost the Istanbul elections. So he knows that Turkish public are happy about religion, happy about Atatürk, happy about culture, but first economy. So Erdogan's ultimate plan is to figure out a timing in a possible post-corona economic recovery. This could be, I don't know, maybe late 2022 or late 2021, but exactly not now. For example, this morning I checked some statistic from Antalya. Most hotels are performing with less than 20%, which means alarming for Erdogan. If people are not happy in economy, they are never happy about the government. But Erdogan expects a post-corona recovery globally, which will help also Turkey. Then that will be perfect, let's say, timing for an election. This is his plan, as far as I understand.
That's an interesting aspect, interesting dimension that you mentioned, post-corona strategy, because after a ongoing crisis with the supply of vaccines, now there are expectations that lots of millions of jabs will arrive to Turkey. So that may be added to the picture of the analysis. Perhaps. Gökhan Bacık from Palacký University in Czech Republic, and we talked again about old and new Turkey. As usual, we will continue this conversation for Ahval viewers and listeners. Thank you, Gökhan, for joining me.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.